Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia, chapter 340. Hey everyone, hope you're having a good day. I'm recording this on Monday, so it should be coming up on Monday afternoon. Fingers crossed. But for chapter 340, overall, it's another setup chapter. This one in particular is focusing on the heroes, then Aoyama, then it has the stinger of Shinzo. So looking at the chapter, I'm happy that we actually went into the hero stuff. Like we said that this was probably what was going to happen given how Horikoshi ended it last time. I was about to say week, but last time. So I think good. In terms of this chapter, because it's a setup chapter, there aren't too many big things. There are like a few interesting points here that are worth looking at in terms of the wording that was chosen for some of the spots. But overall, it's a simple chapter. The real thing to be asking is okay, what are we doing next? Is next week going to be How We Became Heroes Part 4 featuring Shinzo? And, maybe we get some of the business course? I think actually, in the interest of symmetry and making sure that everything is just, making sure that everything is aesthetically pleasing in terms of just who was being showcased, I think going into next week having Shinzo and having random business course people, heck, maybe even throwing class 1B in there, I think that would be quite nice. Knowing that Monoma and Shinzo are essentially a pair. And if you don't think they're a pair, you have to look at Monoma and the way he talks to Shinzo. He talks to Shinzo and puts him in the same category as people with quirks that really aren't suited for being in the spotlight, that kind of stuff. And also considering Horikoshi's interview when he specifically mentions Shinzo and Monoma having a moment, it would be reasonable to hope that Shinzo's stuff gets slotted in with Class 1B. So if we do go into How We Became Heroes Part 4, I would like to know how we became heroes for Class 1B, because Monoma in particular is going to have something to do in the future. Also, I'm pretty sure that Horikoshi is going to shove Shimage in there, because I think he likes that design. So likely that she will do something in the final arc that requires Class 1B being built up. Regardless, Monoma is such a locked-in thing, and his dynamic with Shinzo is so locked in. If we go into Part 4 here, we should see Class 1B. And I know some people don't really care for Class 1B, but whoop-de-doo. Horikoshi cares about Class 1B. Just because he hasn't been able to execute on them properly doesn't mean he doesn't care. So, that's my hopes for next week. And I know it might be a little bit slow, but I'd rather have a good story when you read it back than not. And I think honestly, if he wants to, he could spend 6 chapters on this. I really personally wouldn't mind. Now there is the other thing that some of the spots they feel like kind of hot air. There's some lines that are super critical, but then some lines are just, I think that's probably what makes some people more annoyed, is just some lines don't really serve a lot of purpose. And so, how much purpose a line serves really depends on your own personal style. If you like character interactions between the kids, then you probably don't really care about the majority of the stuff happening with the police. If you care about the intricacies of the police force, then obviously you'll care. Alright, so that being said, I don't think I have any more general notes, so we will move right into talking about chapter 340, and of course, hopefully the birds will not give their commentary. Okay, so this first page, I gotta say, at first it was kind of disorienting, because I was looking at it, it's wow, Central Hospital's area, look at all those buildings, they look so perfectly immaculate. I was thinking, does this make sense? Because even when you look at the text, it says, several police stations have moved their bases of operation nearby, and I'm just thinking, would people really know how to attack it? But then I think, well, at the beginning of this, everyone was at the hospital, so there was a significant hero presence. But yeah, you spend all this time looking at the rest of Hero Academia Society, and then you come into this chapter and you see this one block of the area that's just perfect. No one's really attacked it, and it's it takes a little bit to be oh, right. There were heroes there, and then when the police come in, the police are able to further secure it. One cool thing here, though, is that when it comes to Central Hospital, I would imagine that they do in fact have a significant hero presence there because it's such an important facility. But with the police being there, the police in Hero Academia are very competent. People don't want to say it out loud, but they are. The police are super competent in Hero Academia. They might not have firepower, but they are very good on organizational stuff. So likely the police are actually making a difference to keeping this whole area secured. If you were a villain, and especially if the police are armed. If the police are armed with actual guns, you probably don't want to go there because guns will equalize a good chunk of villains. Anyway, we're at Central Hospital. We find out that there have been several police stations that have moved their bases of operation nearby. And then we're waiting for Aoyama's exam results. I also love that this is League of Villain Paranormal Liberation Front Counterforce HQ. I like that they have to put this on a little sign. This feels kind of like, you know, when you're at a hotel for a convention and they got like the sign for like where to go for your stuff. It's actually pretty funny because they're also here meeting in secret. I mean, if there's any mole within, I'm assuming this is probably inside of Central Hospital. If there's a mole in there, they're gonna see that and like, all right, I'm listening in, right? It's just, it's funny. It's funny. It's funny like the mundaneness of it. Also, you know, one thing that's like worth pointing out is that it's interesting that the roads are still safe enough for like All Might to be traveling between places. I would love like a demographics breakdown of what exactly is going on in different parts of Japan. Like personally, I just want to understand where all the damage is localized and where it isn't. Okay, so page 2 is pretty much the giant justification page where we see Hawks and oh, his little baby wings. Anyway, yeah, we see Hawks here and it's just the giant justification. So go to the author. Like, this is pretty normal for him. He usually, when he's doing these different scenes, he does spend some time setting things up. So, you know, what are the critical things? First, there's a justification for why they're doing things now. The justification is we gotta do things now because Aoyama's kind of moved forward a timetable. We gotta, like, this might be a very tense situation if we don't get this sorted out quickly. Then we move on into justifying why the people here are legit. So this particular justification, you see, we've deemed each of you to be trustworthy. That's just pretty much Horikoshi saying like, okay guys, don't worry about it. These guys, you can trust them 100%. As for, you know, the criteria, you know, one of them has been victimized. Actually, 4 of them have been victimized by Shigaraki. They're probably legit. As for the regulars of the police force, maybe they have connection with students at UA or something like that. Point is, author is saying like, all right, don't worry about these guys. There's not going to be any traitors here. He's probably not going to do any traitor plot points. And then the next justification is, okay, you know, where's Endeavor? Where's Best Genius? Why is number 2 here? And we're number 1, number 3. Okay, they're out at the field. Thanks, Horikoshi. Really appreciate that. They're commanding stuff. So that tells us, okay, things are still going on out there. As peaceful as Central Hospital's area is, the rest of Japan still probably sucks. And then, you know, if you have the question like, okay, why aren't we having more people get involved here? Like, where are the rest of the police force? Where's that dog that helped the kids out during the stain situation? Okay, well, it all happened very quickly, so it's just a small group and safety first and all that. So really, that entire second page is actually really critical when you're looking at it from the writing perspective, because this is pretty much the page that allows the rest of this segment to make sense, and it answers quite a lot of questions that honestly some readers might not have even have had. This is a page really here for just critical readers and just, you know, putting all the foundations out there. What he does next, though, is talking about Ragdoll, which is really interesting. First off, I just want to say, I am very concerned about Ragdoll's posture. I hope that her hands are okay, and I hope that she does not have, like, tendonitis or anything like that. I hope she doesn't have carpal tunnel. Like, that posture is very concerning. I know, you know, cat motif, but I'm really concerned about the girl. She looks confused most of the times. Anyway, also kind of crazy. Anyway, Ragdoll's there. Now, Ragdoll didn't actually do anything here. Like, Ragdoll is really a tool for speculation. I do hope that we get something from her. Like, I want this actually written out, especially if she's going to be the one explaining search's limitations and the boundaries of search. But, please, I hope something comes out of this. That's my only real wish here. Now, there are some interesting things with the composition of this page in general. First off, Ragdoll being here, Ragdoll's introduction is actually also a little bit of a reminder tool, because Ragdoll goes right into wishing that the rest of the Pussycats could be there. And what's going on here specifically, especially when you see the way that the author points out Ryuko, I think that's how I pronounce it, Ryuko, and the gang, and that he has even the girl labeled. This is actually, the labeling is what gives it away. This was a reintroduction page for Ragdoll, and the author wasn't sure if they would know who she's referring to when she's talking about the gang. So I think this is probably just a small tool for like the younger readers. And you know, Ryuko having to get her name listed is because these people are known a lot by their hero names and not their normal names. This in and of itself is a manifestation of the fact that Horikoshi isn't very good at labeling the characters or introducing the characters fully. The characters coming in with their hero names all the time, it does actually make it hard when you have like a really normal name being thrown in there. So this is a side effect of hero names having a bit more precedence in the world of Hero Academia. It's actually really funny when you look at it right above. Horikoshi just goes in there with Ragdoll. So it actually this actually becomes even more funny that he has the problem of specifically these people's names not being known, because he always leads with the hero name, and really what he kind of does in that is that he gives more validation to the heroic side as opposed to the human side of it. And then in the same breath, he uses the person's real name and then has to label it for the readers. This is actually extremely hilarious. Yeah, actually, this is you're witnessing in real time the failings of this particular strategy, and it actually comes off looking even worse because of what has to happen here to make this work. How would you fix this? It's like pretty much like whenever you have a hero name, have the hero name on top and then have their regular name on the bottom. That would be the way to go about it. I feel like, and you might say like, readers can't keep up with all those names. I'm not sure, because One Piece is the other one that does an equivalent of this, like Straw Hat Luffy, Pirate Hunter Zoro, Cat Burglar Nami, Cotton Candy Lover Chopper. One Piece has shown that fans can remember double names. So yeah, I actually feel pretty comfortable saying that there's no way of looking at it. Like, yeah, right here you're seeing a manifestation of the weaknesses of this particular strategy. When you have to label someone like that, it's because you didn't do a good job of introducing the character as their whole self instead of just their hero persona. Probably, and One Piece is the perfect counterexample for why it is possible to do this properly. Anyway, going into the bottom half here, it was still a justification page. What this page pretty much said was, hey, I'm invested in helping because search is being used by that prick. And then she takes us into the key points of this plan, and it's actually pretty interesting because like the key point of the plan, as you find out later, is just we separate them. And it's like there's only one key point. There's only one key point. Oh, we separate them by using Aoyama. No more explanation. So again, like the composition for this chapter was kind of funny and also like very meticulous, but like maybe meticulous in the wrong places. Okay, on page 4, this is actually the really interesting thing, whether we're talking about plan A or plan B. So this is a follow-up from the previous page, and you know what, I didn't notice it until I'm looking at this now. So we do have two big plans. Honestly, we're gonna see both of them. Let's face it, we're gonna have plan A, and then when things go to shit, we're gonna be like, okay guys, time to pull out plan B. So that's really interesting, and it looks like plan A and plan B both they split from each other after we split up Shigaraki and All for One. So that's actually pretty interesting. I do wonder what plan B is going to be. One big thing here though to look at is that neither plan A or plan B will be responsible for splitting them up in any which way. So you could really say that there's a plan 0 that leads into plan A and plan B. Okay, so the middle panel of page 4, not really important. It's just telling us, yeah, okay, he's super strong. And at the bottom of page 4, you're just telling the readers, okay, this is the information that they're working on. They know about the mind meld to some degree, and they know about radio waves. And All Might gives himself a way out by saying that they're not sure to what extent they can share thoughts with each other. Now the big thing is, like, All Might probably doesn't know about the degree of control the vestige inside of Shigaraki has, which is a significant issue. Now page 5 is another justification page, with All Might saying that if those two are together, they're not going to have any hope of victory. So with that, I really think that with the no hope of victory, I think that what that's just saying is, if Shigaraki is more powerful than All for One, who was already really powerful despite being on his deathbed pretty much, having to deal with both of them at the same time will cause issues. There's just there's not many people that can actually deal with them. And you know what? All Might's probably considering the Nomu as well, so that's probably a big factor in his mind. So good to know that one. I do agree. I think if those two are together and then the Nomu show up as well, like there actually is no hope of victory because Izuku can't do everything by himself. Then the middle panel, another justification about why didn't they team up the Star. All Might guesses that it's because of the name All for One. On that point, this is one of those spots where I really, really wish you just had like that extra line of Star saying like, okay, you know, my quirk does affect the villain name of people as long as they identify with it. Because like the issue is, what Star did and what Shigaraki did is because Shigaraki was saying like, I know I am Shigaraki Tomura, but I know that I'm also not. So like what he did is that he put like a percentage to how much he identifies with one of his names. I would have liked to know how much identification with a name is required for that quirk to really take over. If Star had said like, oh yeah, I've been able to affect villains with their villain name before, that would have been really cool. Because the thing with All For One is just like, okay, does All For One actually identify with his name? Because you can recognize that you're called something, but All For One could be like, yeah, you know, All For One is just something that people call me, but I am really Shigaraki so-and-so, right? So, this is, like, just one little line would have been fine to make this work a little bit better. It just would have been nice to know exactly if a villain name would have been problematic for it. And again, the one that caused the issue is Shigaraki, because he brings into question how much you have to identify with it. Anyway, All Might is saying that All For One was scared of it, given that All For One said that he was gambling. When you look at it from the broad perspective, All For One was probably actually really worried about his name being able to affect him, or at least the name All For One being able to affect him. I would say also that All For One probably didn't go out there either, because he's not that kind of guy. He probably doesn't like having to go out that much, and he's still on life support, so it would have been a lot for him. So that's probably the other hidden reason with this. For this one, All Might's line of thought is pretty alright. It's actually kind of funny that Star's team didn't think of that themselves. Like, if you think about it, it is kind of silly that the people who have been with her this entire time, who have been with her through thick and thin, who like Star was ready to like go down with, right, are getting information from a guy who never met her and only knows of her through third-hand information. If you think about it, this is a really ridiculous line of thought here. Because these guys, knowing how that quirk works, will be like, oh yeah, he probably didn't want to get affected by the most overpowered quirk in existence. But what that really does tell you is that this was designed more as a explanation page as opposed to a logical page. We then go into the 10 kilometers apart thing, and this is one of those parts that has just been confusing people. Like, why 10 kilometers? Some people are saying that it's for search, but like, why do you need search? Why is search an important thing for Shigaraki and All For One? Why do you want them outside the radius? And also, I'm not sure that search's radius is 10 kilometers, because the author was implying that Shigaraki used search back during the Toru chapter because of the glowing in his eyes, and then like you see it in a distance. So I'm not really sure. I have seen other suggestions that the 10 kilometers is to prevent the psychic connection and also prevent radio waves. I'm not sure. Like, I feel like radio waves can travel far, but I don't know to what degree Shigaraki could probably try. Okay, so just to give you an idea of why I'm like just so apprehensive about this, I very quickly just looked it up. How far can a cheap walkie-talkie reach? And for people carrying a handheld two-way radio, it can go, and with no obstructions, it can go to around 4 to 6 miles. And that 6 miles is like 9 kilometers. And if you were to just go like how far can a walkie-talkie reach, you have them saying that they can go for 65 miles. Now, mind you, there's a whole lot of physical aspects that come into it. But it's the other thing that makes it hard is that we don't know what exactly Shigaraki's radio waves does. We do know that there was EMP stuff on it, so let's just check what frequency to get an EMP. Oh man, it's always hard to like try and like track back manga science. I don't know, like what frequency does an EMP use? They can have a range of 100 megahertz to 100 gigahertz. Like the higher the frequency, the more that thing's gonna travel. Like there's just a lot of things coming into it. That 10 kilometer number, honestly, it has less to do with common sense and logic. It has more to do with what the story requires. I feel like the author could probably come up with like some weird justification for why 10 kilometers works, but those radio waves, man. It's just the radio waves. I really shouldn't be getting caught up on the science here, because like the science in Hero Academia is non-existent, because like Momo exists. But you know, it's a weird number. I think the big thing here, those 10 kilometers, the thing here is going to be about travel time. I think those 10 kilometers are there to justify a certain amount of time that has to be taken to travel between the 2 points. Better hope that All For One doesn't have the Black Sludge teleport quirk, because that's going to ruin it. So yeah, when I'm looking at 10 kilometers, I gotta say, it's probably less common sense and it's more what the story requires. There's probably going to be a segment where someone's going to talk about having to cross it. And the reason I bring this up is because remember what happened with the 50 kilometers or the 80 kilometers, I don't remember which number exactly, that happened between the mansion raid and the hospital raid. What ended up happening? That range was ultimately crossed. So that's the big thing there. If the author is bringing up a specific number, there's a good chance that that number is going to be crossed, and the amount of time it takes to cross that is going to be critical for the plot's progression or the timing of the plot. Anyway, we go into page 6, which is the story of Dobby. So this one is interesting because I think the translations for this Dobby part, and also I love how like they're talking about how scary Dobby is, and it's like, okay, the translation of Viz only mentioned the kids training camp, but the fan translations and the spoilers mentioned the kids training camp and the mansion area, like the forest around the mansion. So if the forest around the mansion was actually pointed out and I'm not misremembering, I wonder why they dropped it. That's kind of a strange little thing here. Anyway, they're saying they'd be stonewalled as long as Dobby joins their vanguard, and it's like, would you? Because Dobby has significant stamina issues. But okay, sure, you want to make Dobby seem cool, that's cool, whatever. Do whatever you want. Because this leads us into the idea that we just need to split up all of them. Every one of the enemy's major operatives. I would have liked to actually have seen who the major operatives are, like in All Might's mind, but we do kind of know who All Might sees as big threats. Because he's pointed them out before. It's like pretty much Dobby, Toga, Shigaraki, All For One, the Nomu, and the Liberation Front with Skeptic leading it, right? So those are probably who he wants to divide. Now, when I saw this, I thought this was hilarious because I thought, all right, this is like the most shonen thing you can do. Separate the villains and then have people go and specifically deal with each villain. I actually want to see this. I don't know how easy this was going to be to pull off, but I would love to see them divided and conquer them one by one. I don't know about the one by one, but I would love to see this happen just because it's so shonen, man. So shonen. If we can actually get like one-on-ones or maybe like two-on-ones, three-on-ones, that would be ideal. Moving on to page 7, we have another page of Good Cop, Bad Cop, with Tsukachi just being the rationalist and All Might wanting to believe in Aoyama, pointing out that he was born quirkless, his very life was exploited as a resource. Okay, sure. Get it. I get it. All Might feels bad about the whole situation. With Tsukachi, you know, he's still pointing out that he turned his back on decent society, and it's like, okay, you know, this is, again, you know, we need nuance on both sides. Like, for Tsukachi, you know, it would be nice if instead of saying he turned his back on decent society, he could have just said, yeah, you know, he turned his back on decent society while being threatened, right? The good thing is that you did have that nuance coming in later with Izawa, and Izawa actually gave nuance to both points, which I really appreciated. It's just like, for this one, I think Tsukachi's positioned a little bit more harshly, which is just to give more... I think it ends up elevating Izawa, especially with the way that the next page works here. So initially, I was really confused about these lines. You know, All Might saying, I choose to have faith in young Aoyama, and then it goes, I want to trust him, but I do trust his teacher. I thought initially that was All Might speaking. And if it was All Might speaking, this whole thing just becomes, it doesn't make sense because of the way the butt works. But this actually makes more sense if it's All Might speaking, and then this is Tsukachi following up. So All Might chooses to have faith, and Tsukachi wants to trust him, which is nice, because it says, like, you know, Tsukachi, like, again, he has feelings about this, but he has to be super careful. But then he points out he trusts Izawa, so that makes a lot of sense when it's a conversation between the two of them. So pretty much what Tsukachi is saying there, if that is a correct interpretation, is that he is willing to just let Izawa take control of this particular situation. So deferring to Izawa, that's actually a really rational move. We go into page 8. Now this one, very interesting. Pretty much Central Hospital is saying like, okay, we've got nothing. Now mind you, Central Hospital previously had looked at something, made a prediction, and were wrong. So let's just remember that they could still be wrong. Central Hospital has failed us before, unfortunately. But then we have the very interesting thing that Nagant's fate was courtesy of something All For One attained after his grand defeat by All Might. So, you know, maybe the timing about that is a little bit wrong. It could be like around that time, not necessarily after his grand defeat. I don't know why they even call it his grand defeat. That's so bombastic. But this is actually an interesting little bit of information to even be supposing, because the author wants us to have it in mind. I wonder, my thought at this point is that All For One, after having the situation with Shigaraki, figured out what it feels like to be a vestige in another person's body. It's possible that after Shigaraki, in the same way that, think of it like this. All For One, by going into the vestige world with Izuku, supercharged the vestiges of One For All, right? So, would it be strange if All For One, after talking to All For One, supercharged All For One's sense for vestiges? That it actually would make sense within what we know of Hero Academia so far. So I would say that if the author wants us to keep this as the real information, yeah, maybe after talking to himself, All For One figured out how to split himself even better, and that now, whenever he gives away a quirk, he can just shove a vestige in there who can take control or blow someone up. I think that would be the most reasonable thing. Just say that All For One figured out how to separate himself after the fact. Or after getting supercharged by Shigaraki. The next one is Izawa just trying to make sense of the situation. By saying that, well, you know, if you could explode someone in the event of a betrayal, why murder another person as a lesson? Well, you know, this line of thought is fine, but there's a lot of assumptions going into it. Mind you, the author just wants to clear this up. Likely this is the correct line of thought. I don't think the author is going to try and undo this, but just to poke holes here, it's pretty simple. Like, if you have someone blowing themselves up because they don't take you seriously, then you're ultimately losing a toy before the toy can actually be used for all the fun it can extract from a situation. So really, it's just an issue of keeping your resources alive for longer. I mean, you can also tell someone that, hey, like, if you talk, you will blow up, but there's a good chance they also wouldn't believe that. Like, I feel like if you had a villain, if you had a competent villain, the villain would both terrify the person and then put in the bomb in the case that they screw you over. That actually makes a lot of sense. A competent villain would do that. And I mean, why threaten the family with death for lying to him? I mean, if you think about it, that's like, what exactly are you saying that the explosive ability is going to do? The explosive ability is going to kill them. So you could tell them like, hey, you're going to blow up. So you're threatening them with death regardless. So again, what you're just really doing here is showing them that, yeah, you actually are willing to kill them. Like, even if you said that you will blow up, you could 100% still go in there and kill someone just to be like, yeah, no, I'm serious, right? So actually, when you look at this line of thought, it doesn't really work when you apply just reasonable villainous common sense on it. But again, the line isn't there to cover all the bases. The line is there just to justify what's going on in this particular scene, and this is probably the correct stuff. And then it leads us into the only thing that was planted inside of Aoyama was a seed of fear, and this is actually pretty good for All For One, because it's like, at least All For One is relatively good at manipulating people. Now page 10, you know, we're going fully into the Izawa Aoyama stuff. Just to be clear, like, you know, the Aoyama stuff hasn't been my favorite stuff. I appreciate it, but I don't have that many significant opinions about it. Page 10 is pretty much just Aoyama explaining why he is afraid, and, you know, just how his friends make him feel even more scared. And, you know, ultimately, if he finds himself face to face with All For One, yeah, honestly, like, I wouldn't fault him for being afraid of All For One. Like, All For One can blow people up from a distance at this point, right? So it all makes sense. And thankfully, Izawa also just says it out loud too, or he says it to us that, yeah, it makes sense to be scared. So I appreciate that level of nuance. Now, page 11 is where things became kind of funny, and also when I saw Izawa here, I was just thinking of Eren from Attack on Titan, just with the way that Izawa looks. Anyway, I liked what was happening here. Like, Izawa's really critical look and all that, because it's like, oh yeah, he wants to rip the fear out of him, so let's be a little bit scary. Yeah, no, be a little bit desperate. I really appreciated that. I thought that was a really good choice. So the interesting thing here is, he's telling Aoyama, hey, once this is over, you may not have a home at UA. But what's actually really interesting here is that when you look at the rest of the chapter, what Izawa was pretty much doing was that he was being aggressive about this part. Because later you even have Aoyama thinking about how Izawa is not going to expel him. So what this ultimate message was like, hey, you may not have a home at UA, but your friends and we're going to protect you anyway. That's pretty much the overall thought that was going on here. That even if Aoyama isn't welcome, they will welcome him. They in particular, and probably also Nezu, because that's what Nezu is all about. Also, when you have Izawa telling Aoyama that the only thing that he can do is fight, in return for all the damage he's caused, this is pretty much going down like the route of like what happened with Naruto. It's pretty much like, yeah, you're a super criminal, but you're such a combat, like you helped out in the fight, you were a war hero, so it's gonna be okay. Like this is pretty much redemption through fighting. Better hope he doesn't die. On page 12, we have Aoyama freaking out and Izawa making things easy by just saying like, we're gonna make use of you. So I think this actually was a really good idea here, because if you make Aoyama feel like he's a pawn, that takes away some of the guilt here, or that takes away something from Aoyama, which I think makes it easy. In terms of how this page was constructed, it was a little bit confusing because Izawa's final panel is overcoming Aoyama's panel. And because of the way you're trained to read manga, this one actually changes the rules, where you have to read like Aoyama's, then Izawa's, then Aoyama's again, and then Izawa's final one. Regardless, I really appreciated Izawa telling it to him straight and being like, yeah, no, you screwed us over, but ultimately just telling him like, hey, you have to do this to make things better, I think was a very nuanced approach, and I'm glad that we got this level of nuance again. Now, the interesting thing on page 13 was, of course, that we got a little bit of Kurugiri. I don't remember Kurugiri's rhetoric, or I don't remember the rhetoric from Vigilantes and all that about whether or not they talked about a life burden with guilt or anything like that. But pretty much what happens here is that Izawa's talking, you have that quick slide to Kurugiri. So this is probably happening in real time because of the transition lines. I wonder if there's like a brain signal that popped up, right? I wonder if they detected something. I wonder if Kurugiri somehow felt this thing that was happening all the way over here. If we go into part 4, I would also, if the author wants to do it, I would be down with like the story of how Kurugiri became a hero as well. I would really appreciate that. Anyway, page 13 ends off with Izawa saying like, yeah, we're gonna protect you. And we have Aoyama. Ultimately, this is the face of how Aoyama became a hero. Anyway, finally, we end off with Shinzo. That path is one we'll all walk together. And at this point, I just want to say, like, people keep saying, like, Shinzo's going to replace someone in Class 1A, and it's like, he's not. He's really not. He's in the same image as, like, all the other kids in Class 1A. Like, this whole replacement thing doesn't make any sense. Like, why would the heroes kick someone out of class? Okay, if this was a normal situation and there was an apocalypse in the background, why would the heroes kick out a student from the hero course when there's actually legitimate problems going on in the world? Like when they're actually short on heroes and anyone that comes out of UA is probably going to be top tier. Why would they kick anyone out? Like this whole replacement thing doesn't make any sense. Anyway, that's just a personal gripe. We get to see Shinzo. He looks like doing whatever a Spider-Man can. I don't really care. Good to see Shinzo here. Shinzo was going to be in the final fight. We knew that from a long time ago. So good to see that he has a pretty cool costume. I am interested in what the time is because Shinzo was left behind by Class 1A. They're not there with him. So I wonder what Shinzo's going to do. Like it really does. I feel like he's going to be going towards Class 1B, but we'll have to see next week. Fingers crossed that we get the story of how we all became heroes part 4. Anyway, everything's been set up. Aoyama's going to be important. Aoyama's going to be fighting here. They're going to take back their world, or Japan. They're going to beat up All For One. It's going to be a good time. Guys, this was a long video, but I hope you all enjoyed. There was quite a bit to go through. Actually, when you look at it, like the dialogue was kind of heavy on this one. Am I excited for next week? Oh yeah. Actually, I'm actually really falling in love with the idea of how we became heroes, Kurugiri, Shinzo, and Class 1B. I hope we see it next week. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below. And until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.